Welcome back to the Top 6 show. Hit the like button. Make sure you are subscribing to the Football Terrace right now. Some familiar faces on the panel with Henry Talks Bollocks. We've got Ram and we've got Man Like Will, and some new faces to the Football Terrace as well. We're always looking to bring in new blood, new opinions, new faces. We've got Toon Tactics TV along the bottom there. In the middle, we've got Callum from Dad's Our Podcast, Our Job Podcast. Who's an Arsenal fan. And we have Harry Richards, who supports Manchester United. I don't know what he's doing there, but obviously the Yorkshire celebration. He's very happy about Amarin being here. Of course, viewers, let us give us your thoughts, feelings, opinions on the show, especially if you're watching the playback. Leave your comments below. But evening, gentlemen, how are we all? We well?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, man, all good, all good.
Very good, thank you.
Good.
Well, we've got a few days left, and then football's back finally because that international break.
And then we got 3 months of it, solid 3.5, 4 months solid football, which is nice.
Wow, dog.
Nice. I can't. Yeah, the international breaks are a killer. I'm not gonna lie, they are a killer. Thank God for David Coote, otherwise we'd have had nothing to talk about for 2 weeks. You know what I mean? So fair play to him. He's given us all something to do. There's loads to talk about today, but Mama Flossie's in the house, who's another Newcastle fan, as bigging up Toon Tactics there. I wanted to start actually with a bit of Man City, because although the reports are that Pep is going to sign a 1-year extension, I said it at the weekend and I'll say it again, I don't care who it triggers. That for me is him confirming his exit from the club. That's him saying, I'm not going to be here for the long term. I'm going to be moving on. How significant, Henry, do you think that is for the rest of the Premier League, that it does appear that there's only going to be this season and probably next with Pep Guardiola remaining in the English Premier League?
I think he's obviously waiting to see what happens with the court case. I think that's why he's going to sign a 1-year deal. If it comes out that they are, actually guilty, I think he will be 100% moving on somewhere else, maybe managing a nation, maybe going to another La Liga club. I think, I've said it many times, I think Girona will approach him. His brother-in-law is on the board there. They're also a Catalonian club, so it kind of makes sense. But in terms of the rest of the Premier League, when Guardiola leaves, of course, Man City got a fantastic squad, but it opens it up for maybe what can Ruben do. Liverpool at the moment are flying. Arsenal, maybe a striker, and they're back up there. So it definitely opens up the Premier League. But then again, City have won it without Pep. They won it with Mancini. They won it with Pellegrini before. But I don't think Pep. I think it's pretty obvious Pep wasn't going to sign a long deal. If he goes and signs a 5-year contract and they end up getting relegated, he's going to be shooting himself in the foot. Then it's smart. It's a smart play by City, because it's like saying, well, hang on, he's not going anywhere just yet, but let's just wait and see. Because if they get off scot-free and they are innocent, he will then extend that 1 year to maybe 2, 3, 4 more years down the line. And then could we be talking about 5, 6, 7, 8 Pete's? Are we now talking about the English version of Celtic if that happens? Because let's be honest, I think Liverpool at the moment are title favourites. I think they're playing really, really well. I think their squad is performing way above what a lot of people thought they would. But if City still win this league, a lot of people are not going to be surprised, are they? Then if he signs a contract, they win it next year. They may bring in a few players. I think it's a smart play from Guardiola. He's kind of not keeping all these eggs in one basket. So
I agree to an extent. As in I disagree to an extent in the sense of I don't think he's doing it in terms of seeing what happens with the court case. I think seeing what's happened with his squad right now, I think someone like a Guardiola, he wants to leave on the biggest high, which is winning a Champions League or winning a Premier League. I think looking at this squad right now, the fact that Rodri's injured, Ruben Diaz is out for a significant period, a lot of the defense is gone, he may be thinking, let me have one more season where I can really win something, give the fans something to cheer about, and then once I do that, I'll leave on a high. Like the old Batman quote Terry loves to use all the time, like, you die a hero. That's basically what I think Guardiola's doing.
That's not the quote.
A guy like him.
The quote from Batman isn't "die a hero."
And it doesn't end that way. It goes a little bit longer. It kind of goes into you live long enough to become a villain. So
we don't care about the other bit. It's just the first bit. But look, at the end of the day, I think Guardiola, the kind of guy that he is, and obsessed on winning and leaving on a particular high, I think he wants to make sure he secures a major trophy before he leaves City.
I think it's kind of like what Henry was saying in terms of the court case. I think that's the main reason why his deal's not long. Because if Pep Guardiola leaves Man City, where do you go from there? I know that you brought up Girona, but Girona don't have a big budget. Even though they're owned by the team by the people that own like Man City, for example, they're part of the City group. They don't have the kind of financial backing because they don't make enough money. So, like, where does Pep go? I don't think that he suits national team roles because you can't buy players for your national teams. And it's kind of like
what happens if he wins it with Girona, though? If he dethrones Madrid and Barca, like, there's no question about it.
Yeah, but why would Pep take that risk? Like, why would Pep take – like, why would you leave Man City with all those resources that you have, right, where you're able to go buy the best players in the world? You've already established them as a giant in Europe. You would leave – and, again, this is if they're found innocent on these charges and nothing really happens to them. So you would leave Man City to then go to Girona. It would make absolutely no sense. I think he's at the perfect place for him right now. Like, there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah. Also, if City are guilty, that's going to impact everything to do with the City. If they're guilty of everything, this is, right? We're talking here. It's hypothetical. So City fans, please don't cry because we're talking in the hypothetical of, is he delaying because of the court case? If they're guilty for the large amount of these charges, it's going to impact Girona as well because it's going to impact the City group as a whole. I think he's waiting. I do think he's waiting to find out. If he was he sort of said before in press conferences, I'll be here no matter what happens. Why he ain't signed it yet, have you? I think he's waiting. And by the way, he's sensible to wait. As much as he's being told by the owners, trust me, mate, we ain't done anything wrong. He'd be a madman to sign up for another 4 years and then suddenly, one, have his titles potentially stripped, and secondly, be managing against Wayne Rooney and Plymouth. It'd be crazy to do that. Like, he's better off waiting to see what happens and then making his decision. But I do agree with Will. Unless he goes to a club that's suddenly going to get an injection of cash, who's a bit of a sleeping giant. So let's say AC Milan are getting new owners. There's going to be new money available and he can kind of reawaken them to be a dominant force. I don't see why he leaves, man. I don't see what other club he can go to.
But there's no
other club.
I think, Terry, I think that, look, right, we all know, that Pep Guardiola, he is this manager who's like once in a lifetime, right? But no one's spoken about this one team, Inter Miami, right? But like, paint the scene here, yeah. Lionel Messi, Pep Guardiola, yeah. He's coached him at Barcelona, right? I think in Pep's head, he's thinking, yo, you know what? I've done everything, Champions Leagues, three-peats, everything. Bro, he may be thinking, you know what? Let me go and dominate the MLS, right? Because over there, it had been LA Galaxy, LAFC, or Atlanta United, right? It's been those three teams, right? And it'd be a nice way for not only Messi, but for Pep Guardiola to sort of go out or the bank ex-players that he coached, Messi. Because I think, look, right, he goes to Girona, right? That football carnage said, right? The odds of him toppling Barcelona and Real Madrid is like saying Tajiri's going to squash the Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Like, no. Girona are a Champions League fighting club. Real Madrid and Barcelona are like in the echelons of a whole new different world. Into Miami, a good amount of money coming through. Ex-players are there who he's coached. And I just think it'd be a nice way to end Pep's career, personally.
I mean, look, if he wants to go into semi-retirement, I think you're making a decent point. I think maybe if he thinks, you know what, I fancy that, or it could be Saudi. One of the reports I did see today is that Brazil want him. Sorry, go on, Cal. Callum, there's
know,
two
I-
Callums on, by the way. Two Callums on. Sorry. So yeah. Callum Laguna. Sorry, mate. Go on.
Let me jump on. I think he's waiting. I think he knows that the club's in a transition. I think the team's in a transition. I think he's waiting to see what happens. I think hypothetically they're guilty, and he knows that they're gonna potentially have backlash from that. I think some really good points. I think if he went to Italy, that would be interesting, especially if he goes on to win a Champions League for Italian team, because it's been a while, and that would definitely, shoot Italian football back up, and I think that would be interesting. I think that would interest him to bring that to Italy again. The Girona thing, I think if he went and done that and toppled Barcelona and Real Madrid, he's completed football, and he basically, as you say, he never has to do anything ever again in his whole career because he's just completed the game. Going to America, that is semi-retirement. I mean, I know it's getting a lot of hype at the moment, but again, it's not the same. If you're at that level, unless you can't cope with it anymore, and you want to have a rest, you're gonna want to stay in Europe. And I can just see him going to Italy and really trying to bring a Champions League to an Italian club, and I think that's the way forward for him. And like I say, I think in a year's time, that's exactly what he will do.
I've got to ask, why is Spain not an option for him? Because you look at that team with obviously Lamine.
Which team?
Yeah.
I mean, the Spain team with Lamine, obviously Gavi, Pedri.
But that's like me asking you, is a Man United an option? That's like me asking you, a Man United an option for Klopp in the future? It's the same difference, in my opinion.
Can I say something?
I might take it.
Do you know why I don't think he'd go to Spain? Because I don't think it's enough for him. He lives and breathes it. Yeah, if you see him on the touchline and you see all the stuff behind the scene with the Amazon projects and all that sort of stuff, he is on it, and I just don't think it will interest him enough. I don't think it is enough around it where he's involved enough, where it's going to draw him in enough to want him to take that job. I just don't think he's got enough in.
But the thing is, I feel like we're all kind of overreacting, right? Because we see Man City not playing the best this season. It's like, oh, is Pep going to leave? Again, anywhere that he goes, unless Barcelona bring him back, which at the moment, they don't like they need him. Hansi Flick is doing a great job so far. You leave Man City to go to AC Milan, it makes no sense. Like, that's a downgrade in terms of with the budget that he's going to have to spend, the squad that he'll have. Going to PSG, that's possibly the only team that can match in terms of they'll give him an unlimited transfer fund, but it's Ligue 1. Like, it's McDonald's League. Like, you are at Man City winning Champions League, you're dominating the Premier League. So because you're struggling, instead of just rebuilding the squad, you're gonna go to PSG, or it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I think the only club that he would go to is Barca. If he leaves Man City, I fully think that he's retiring, because anywhere else is too much of a gamble on his legacy. Like, it's kind of similar to why you don't see Zidane managing, right? It's because what he accomplished when he was at Real Madrid, he doesn't see him doing that at any other club. So why go to another club? And then now you possibly tarnish the reputation or the stigma that you've built up about yourself.
Yeah.
So
I hear that.
I don't see him going anywhere else, because Man City is just the perfect place for him right now.
What are you saying, Cal? Coppish Cal.
So I actually think that PSG makes a lot of sense for him. And the reason I say that is because it's guaranteed league titles for him if he goes there, because he will have the funding. Plus, he has the name to attract top players there. PSG have never won a Champions League. So if he goes there and he doesn't win a Champions League, no one can turn around and say, oh, you've messed up. Because at Bayern Munich, that was a criticism. You haven't won a Champions League. At Man City, he got the same criticism because he was winning everything else apart from the Champions League. If he goes PSG and he's able to win the Champions League with PSG, which I think is very capable of doing, given that they won't have as vigorous a schedule as the other teams, I think he'll go down as an immortal in France, England, Spain, maybe not Germany, but 3 out of the big 5 leagues. I think that separates him from a lot of managers. So I actually wouldn't be surprised if he went there. And I think it makes a lot of sense. Going to AC Milan, even if he gets funding, he's not going to be able to still match the spending power of the other teams. When he was at Bayern Munich, he was far and away at the best team in the league and was able to blow every other team out of the water financially. Same at Man City. At Barcelona, he didn't necessarily have to do that, but at Spain, it's Real Madrid or Barcelona that the best players usually tend to go to. he'd have that same luxury in France with PSG, plus that golden carrot of potentially winning the Champions League. I think that would be the wise move. But if I'm going to be honest, as long as he buggers off out of England, I'm all right, man.
To be fair to Pep, though, so I think people do have this misconception that Pep buys. Like, Pep doesn't really buy world-class players. Like,
no, I'm not saying he does. I'm not saying he does.
You know,
he
and I think Manchester United outspent
players.
Man City in like the last like 10 years. So you know, like there's like that narrative that like he needs a financial backing in terms of like he's going to go buy the best.
I think the balance here, though, when it comes to finances, it's not just what you spend on players. You are right. He hasn't gone out at since he's been at Man City and broken all the transfer records, spent the most each summer. But what Pep needs to be able to do is be at a wealthy club who can maintain the squad in the sense of, as KDB turned into the best midfielder in the world, Man City were able to keep increasing his salary to keep him at the club. What Pep wouldn't be able to do is have this 8 years of dominance in England. If as soon as a player demonstrated world-class abilities, if there was 10 other teams around the world that could take those players away because City didn't have the money, the wage bill for a club is far more important than the transfers if you're going to put the two up against each other. So it isn't just about what you spend on players, it's being able to keep people. And the problem is, let's say he did turn AC Milan into a side that were the best in the world. Financially, 2 or 3 Premier League teams, the Spanish giants, Bayern Munich, and maybe even some of their own competitors in Italy would be able to financially beat AC Milan to an offer. Say they've got a world-class striker. What are they going to be able to afford to genuinely offer him? £250,000 a week, maybe 300. There's nothing stopping a Real Madrid saying there's 800 grand a week. Boom. AC Milan. And I don't think Pep, that's the only thing I would agree with. I'd love to see Pep go to a club that's a bit more of a project. I don't think you will, but I'd like to see it personally. But I don't think he's going to go anywhere where it isn't almost a guarantee they can keep hold of their best players if they want to keep them. So I think that is getting that balance right is going to be key. But I agree with Cal. I just want to see him. No disrespect to Pep, but a lot of respect for him as a manager. But I just want to see him out of the Premier League, bro. I just want to see him gone, if I'm being honest.
Hey, Terry, I think, look, Real Madrid could be an option. I'm just saying. I know the Barcelona links and all those
way.
Bro, I'm saying. I'm just saying, look, Carlos' job right now.
Dreaming.
Carlos' job right now is underneath a lot of pressure. Who would have thought that Luis Figo would have went from Barcelona? Look, Florentino Perez is very convincing. That's all I'm saying. Don't be surprised.
You said Spain wasn't an option. Real Madrid.
No, I didn't say Spain wasn't an option. I just don't think that he suits international football. I think Pep likes to be at a club.
I agree with that. I think.
That's all I'm saying. It could happen. Florentino Perez is a very convincing guy.
I look, Pep Guardiola, right? Look, I agree with what Terry Callum said. That look, Pep needs to dip quickly out of this league, innit? Because it would make it a lot more competitive, right? However, here is the caveat, right? Who does City bring in? Because let's not take the mick here, right? What Man City elite level coach can go, right? Yeah. You buy Pep, you in, bro. There is no coach that I can name who can bring in and turn water into wine, and that'd be the only issue that
I don't think it's an issue though. I don't think it's an issue though, Harry. There is no manager as good as him in the world. So yeah. Everybody is a downgrade, but you just look at Liverpool with Slot and Klopp.
Yeah,
it is seamless. City are well run. The only way it will go massively wrong is if they are found guilty, fined, and sued, and they lose half their squad, and Pep leaves. Then they're going to have problems. But they will go after one of the most competent coaches in the world, who will come in and they will maintain a certain level. I don't think they'll be as good when Pep leaves, because Pep's one of the greatest managers of all time. However, I don't think there is going to be this industrial-sized kind of collapse from Manchester City that everybody's hoping for. What they may be is a bit more like this season, where they're a little more human, where they maybe, if you just take 10 points a season off them, they're a different outfit. They are far more catchable. They're far more beatable. And I think that's maybe what you will see. But 10 points a season on average off City still makes them one of the highest and best teams in the world. It's just that's how I think it will look. Viewers, look, we'd love to get your thoughts, your feelings, your opinions on this in the comments section below. Make sure you're all getting that done and hitting the like button. Moving on from this story, Coppish Cow. Troy Deeney has said
I knew this was coming.
It has to come. It has to be mentioned today. He has said today, it's just his opinion, but Mohamed Salah is not world class. Said he isn't. What? I know you're a Liverpool fan, so there's some bias in this. What's your take on that from Troy Deeney?
Okay, so I'll caveat this by saying I've actually met Troy a couple of times and spoken to him a couple of times. He's
I know.
That's why I came to you first. he's a decent guy. With all due respect to Troy, though, this is one of the wildest takes I've heard. I think he's completely articulated himself incorrectly. And the reason I say that is because I think he's going on the premise of he looks at certain footballers from an aesthetic point of view. So aesthetically, Salah can look very awkward on a football pitch. But I don't think you can disregard his consistency, his fitness, his numbers, and the fact that he's continuing to maintain the level at the highest level. Like in Liverpool this season, we're top of the league, top in the Champions League, and I think he's responsible for like over half of our goals, whether it be a direct goal or a direct assist. If you're not calling Salah world class when he's in the top 7 or 8 in terms of goal scorers in the Premier League era history, Champions League, he's high up there as well. If he's not world class, then most players along history are world class. I'm not going to sit there and say he's the prettiest looking footballer in terms of with the ball at his feet and all that. He's not. Vinny Jr., who Troy uses as an example, looks way prettier on the ball, way prettier on the eye. But in terms of effectiveness, which last time I checked, the main objective of football is to get the ball in the back of the net and score more goals than the other team. I don't think many players do that better than Salah. So if not many players do that better than Salah, then he's got to be world class. But all respect to Troy, and cheers for that, Terry.
I want to throw this was a quote tweet I saw above Troy Deeney's comments. And I wanted to put this out there for the panel to have a discussion about, because it is the international break after all. And it said, it's totally acceptable to think this, that Mo Salah's not world class. Don't let anyone gaslight you into thinking otherwise. He goes, we're in an era of poor elite talent. People grew up watching Baggio, Romario, Ronaldo, Zidane, Ronaldinho, Kaká, Messi. They snuck Neymar in there. Cristiano, because I think Neymar's more this generation. Does that make sense? But there we go. If those players are considered world class, is it fair to say, and I'm going to throw this question to I'm going to go to Toon Tactics, we haven't heard from him yet. Is it fair to say the likes of Mo Salah are not world class if those players were? Or do you put Mo Salah in that world class bracket with those players?
Yeah, I think Mo Salah is certainly world class. And I think there's probably a distinction between world class and what the post was saying around, I think what he's talking about is legends, if anything else. And funnily enough, during those days, people my age were saying, these guys aren't as good as the guys I was watching, i.e. George Best and all the other guys. So I always kind of feel like it's history repeating itself, and people aren't quite, I kind of look at the past with rose-tinted glasses sometimes. It's not to say that those guys weren't world-class or legends, they are. But I just think I'm always surprised actually at footballers like Troy Deeney and others kind of always living in the past whenever I hear their punditry, because they're still in that football environment. And I'm always surprised to hear just how backwards it is sometimes in terms of player, how they look at player profile, what they expect from players, skills and stuff like that. And I think Callum was right in terms of I just read Troy Deeney's assessment of Salah, and he goes, yeah, I don't think he's world class because I wouldn't want my kids to play like him. I've never known the definition of world class being, if I want my kids to be playing like that. I think world class should be what it is. Obviously, consistency over a period of time at an elite level, in pressurized situations, and etc. etc. But no, I do think people kind of look at the past and what it is now with kind of rose-tinted glasses, and there's a development of what world class is and the players that we have. And I think there's an argument to say that today we have bigger, faster, stronger players, and you could ask, would those same players be as effective in terms of what they were doing then to what they're doing now? I think that would be an argument of itself. Could you afford to have an Eden Hazard? Yes, he can dribble past 4 or 5 players, you need to defend at the same time, and you can't just have a guy that's just walking around the pitch, and when he wants to turn it on, he wants to turn it on. And so I think Mohamed Salah, like I said, is world class, and there's like I think it's important to move into what modern day footballer is.
What are you saying, Henry? Do you feel like the players that we now put in the world class category are a lower standard of player compared to eras gone by?
Well, first of all, I want to say Troy Deeney is a complete and utter idiot. Like, nice guy and all that, but that is complete rage bait. If anyone who thinks Mohamed Salah is not world class, you're tapped. He's been doing it for 6 or 7 years at the highest level, Premier League, Champions Leagues, won the biggest honours, been in, African Cup of Nations finals, representing Egypt. He is the best player in the league right now. He's got 20 GA already this season. It's pure rage bait. Fair enough, Deeney, you got the reaction you wanted. But in terms of the standard of player compared to, let's say, 25 years ago when you had the R9s, etc., you can argue the quality has decreased a little bit, but it's more of a system game now. It's not necessarily individual talent winning a huge amount of games. Like Salah, okay, he's not as pretty as a Vinicius Junior on the eye, or a Neymar on the eye, or a Ronaldinho. But look at his numbers. Look at his numbers. He's got 100. What's he got, Callum? 160 Premier League goals or something like that.
Yeah, 164.
So we're talking about the conversation now is comparing him to Thierry Henry. So we now saying Thierry Henry is not world class. Like,
by the way, I'm not comparing him to Henry before.
I'm not saying that, but like his numbers.
I am.
But why not?
On a par.
Why not?
I am.
I don't need this drama in my life, boys. I don't.
That's how legends are made.
I want to throw this out there, though, right? Look, I'm not disrespecting anybody from the past, but I'm just this conversation takes me back to when I was about maybe 13, 14 years old, and me and my big brother was. I remember sitting in the living room, and Man United had just knocked Arsenal out of the FA Cup in the treble-winning season. So I would have been 13, not 14. That was in '99. And me and my brother were talking about how amazing both teams were and how good all the players were. And we're talking no different to young people of this generation. I don't know. Mo Salah's world class, and KDB, the greatest midfielder that we've seen, etc., right? Just for my dad to turn around and start looking at us like we were talking shit, and then started bringing up, players like Jimmy Greaves, players like Platini as an example. And I feel like sometimes this isn't an individual generation thing. I feel like you get 2 or 3 generations that are clumped together because of the overlap of players. But my dad wasn't saying that Ryan Giggs, and he wasn't saying that Bergkamp, and he wasn't saying that a young Nicolas Anelka, and he wasn't saying that a David Beckham were bad football players. But in his mind, the generation he grew up watching through the 60s and the 70s and the early 80s, he just held it in a higher regard. And now what I'm seeing as a 38-year-old man is kind of my generation, people slightly younger. We're grabbing those players, the Baggios, the Ronaldinhos, that era, and we're like, no, they were the world-class players. Everybody now is meh. But I just think about the younger generation. In another 20 years' time, this conversation's happening again, where people are saying, how dare you say John Smith is world class? If you'd have seen Mo Salah, if you'd have grown up watching Mo Salah, you would not be saying that John Smith is world class. I feel like it's like music. Every couple of generations, they always, they think their music was the best. But it's a case of, I don't know anymore. As the older I get, the more I think it's just a generational thing. And
Terry.
Go on,
Terry,
Cal.
do you know what it is? It's nostalgia. It's what them memories they give you. So like I feed off, like, as you say, the Henrys, even going back to like the Ian Wrights, the moments that they gave you, the Dennis Bergkamp, that's what makes them world class, because you go back and you go, I remember when he did this, or I remember when they did that, and then you want to pass that on to your children. You get them to watch it on YouTube or whatever it is, that we got it on now. And as you say, in 20 years' time, it'd be my kids talking about, hopefully if he wins anything, Odegaard or Gabriel or whoever it might be nice, fellas, be nice. But like that's it's nostalgia, isn't it? It's the memories they give you. It's like David Beckham. I know he's a Man United fan, Man United player, but that free kick he scored for England, for me, he's always going to be an England legend because of that free kick. Because I remember being there with my dad in the pub, and everyone going bananas, and it's that's the memory, isn't it? And that's what we thrive on. And I think that's, as football fans, that's what we thrive on. That's what we're going to pass on to our kids and talk about. So yeah, it's all nostalgia for me.
No, I get that. I just want to say as well. I think you got to be really careful with these narratives as well. I always feel you got to be careful with these narratives, depending on who you're trying to shit on. So I saw a lot of City fans today, for instance, online talking about how that quote tweet and tweets like it are correct. That the standard of football today is not as good as it was. So again, if I was being petty, I would agree with them, because if the standard of football now isn't what it was, it means that City can't claim that they're the greatest English team of all time, because they're doing it in an era. They're also, and it's not all City fans say this, I'm using this as an example, but fans of all clubs do this. We had a gal on the show the other day trying to fight an argument that based on Foden having a poor season by his standards so far, it undoes everything he's done in the past, which is a dangerous narrative to set. Secondly, he stated that because he's only doing it in a good team, you shouldn't rate him as highly, to which then I said, well, Henry only did it in a brilliant Arsenal team. Be careful of the narratives you create, because you can undo your own club's legacies, whether it's historic or in the contemporary moment. And I think that I think you've got it bang on the head, Cal. That's Guna, Cal, on the nostalgia element. And I think our minds are built in a way where we can only take in a certain amount of I don't want to, not a certain amount of nostalgia. I want to, I don't know, you older guys, I've got to a point where I'm no longer looking at the new fashions that come out and going, I'm going to wear that. I'm at a point. Yeah, I'm very comfortable. And do you know what's really funny? It's still okay. You kind of get away with it in this era, but maybe another 50 years, if I'm still dressing the way I dress now, because that's how I like dressing, it's going to look like those old men you see walking down the street in their cardigans, in their chinos, right? I think haircuts, I think music, I think what you love in football. I think human beings are limited. We typically get to a certain point where we go, I'm done, I'm stopping here. I listen to a bit of modern day music, but I would much rather stick on an Usher album from 25 years ago than listen to something new, because that's what I want to do. Or I stick on, if I'm having a party, garage goes on, right? The youngsters that are in, my nieces and nephews are like, what the fuck is this noise? It's garage, bruv. It's great. But I just feel like that's happening in football. But it's the first time ever that it's happening in public, because everyone's on social media talking about it, really. And it's an interesting, I think Mo Salah's amazing. The only thing I'm reluctant to do is jump on this. Football's at a much lower standard now than it used. I still think it's at a very good standard. I don't think the Premier League in the last 4 or 5 years is as competitive as it was between sort of 2004 and around 2013. I feel like that era where you just had 4 teams every season in the Premier League that were capable of winning the Champions League, which, by the way, had 7 or 8 other teams that were all capable of winning it at the same time. That was when the highest level of quality was in European football in my lifetime. I can't talk before the 80s because I wasn't born. But yeah, I am reluctant to start talking about the standard of football now is on its arse, because Man United, if I set that narrative and then Man United start winning trophies, what am I going to start playing that down because it's in a bad era? No fucking chance. I ain't doing that.
But Terry, I don't think it's black and white though. Kind of is like, so with like that tweet that you brought up about the guy naming like all the world-class players from maybe like 20 years ago. I do think that, and I wasn't watching back then, but I do think that the standard has dropped off a little bit from like the early 2000s per se. But that doesn't mean that the players currently now aren't better than, let's say, players from like the 50s and 60s, right? Because like whenever I see clips from like the 50s and 60s, I'm gonna be real, those players look like they suck, but everybody talks about them like it's like they're like the greatest ever.
Yeah, but what you got to remember with that, Will, what you got to remember, sorry to butt in there, what you got to remember with that, for the players from that era, is they were playing with what looked like boots from building sites on pitches that were uneven with balls. So, for instance, the balls, I don't know, the balls that we use in England, then these big leather balls, when they were wet, they weighed like 2 bags of sugar. So these men were kicking a ball that was like a medicine ball around a football pitch. And I think that those types of things, to your point, always have to be kind of factored into these conversations. That,
well, no, for sure. But like, I saw a clip. I can't name you the goalkeeper. It was a black and white clip. There was a long range shot. The goalkeeper made a standard save. And like the commentary back then was like, oh my goodness, like he's world class, like he's the best. This is why I forget the goalkeeper's name, but like the way that they were going on about a basic save
But you could argue that.
This is what I'm saying in terms
Could
of.
you argue that about Jesse Owens though? Jesse Owens' time of winning the Olympics wouldn't qualify him today to go to the Olympics.
No,
That
so
doesn't-
no,
I
wait,
think
no,
that's why you
so
got to
what
be
I'm saying-
careful.
wait, no, so but with Terry, so like what I'm saying is, yes, even though the standard from let's say 15 years ago has dipped off a little bit, I still think that the players that we see now across any sport, like basketball, like this sport, any sport, what you're seeing currently now is better than what you saw 40 or 30 years ago, because their version of the game was so slimpistic that it's so much advanced now that so for Jesse Owens, for example, for his time he was great, but in the grand scheme of things, no, he's not great. Like, would he beat a Usain Bolt? No,
He's not great.
no,
I
for
think-
his time he was great,
But
but
then
if I'm factoring in the athletes now who would dust him,
Yeah,
Then
but
They
how-
didn't have that. They didn't have that technology back then.
Yeah,
all the science behind.
if you could go to take Jesse Owens at 16 years old now, take him in a time machine to now and nurture him through this era with the food, the technology, the spikes, I reckon he'd run faster than 10.2 seconds.
yeah, but we can't do that. I can only go off of what he did back then, and now the runners now are just more advanced. But hold on, wait. But then some of these runners who are faster than him get called trash or like they suck. But then you're gonna go rate Jesse Owens, who times they clear. So it's kind of like it's like the athletes now are better than what they were 50 years ago.
I think
I'm just changing.
I think the word look again, right? I'm of the more younger generation, right? And to me, the term is of world class has gone genuinely out of the window. I've seen people already calling Cole Palmer world class. They got etc. To me, first of all, Troy Deeney calling Salah not world class. That again, sound guy, but he's a Watford player, guys. He's an ex-Watford player. To talk about Mohamed Salah, bro, this guy, when he broke out in his first season, he puts up Ballon d'Or numbers. I don't think people want to understand this, right? Mohamed Salah, he for me is the second greatest winger in the Premier League of all time. Look, I'm a United fan saying this with chest, by the way, right? This guy is
Who's the best,
bro? But for me, I'm going to stick with my boy Bexy, man. David Beckham, bro. Like, you know what I mean? But anyway, Salah, bro, I'm seeing him, already 20 GA already, and I'm seeing people like, wait until Salah goes to a different team, he'll decline, bro. When you are like that, you do not drop down. And look, and I think that when you're an athlete, right, you do not become washed overnight, right? You don't, right? That's like me saying to Terry, right? Michael Carrick, age like 34 years of age, under Mourinho was washed. Right? No, he wasn't. Right, bro, when you are elite, you do not lose that class. So look,
Terry.
I was going to just say, because how do you guys kind of, when you define standards, and I think my bias is, because a lot of you guys obviously kind of, we got support Man United and Liverpool. So when you guys say, oh, the standards have dropped off from before, I think you guys are talking from like what you guys have seen, Champions Leagues and stuff like that. Maybe my perspective is a little bit more unique, whereas obviously I seen, when I started supporting my club, Newcastle were there, and I've seen them obviously decline over 15 years. But during that time, I've also seen clubs at a lower level rise. Brighton's, Bournemouth, Eddie Howe brought in not hoof ball style, but on the ground playing football style. So in my mind, when people say the standards have dropped off, I'm like, really? Like, I've never known, for instance, back in the day, Bolton or anything, Blackburn, playing the kind of style that Bournemouth are playing now, Brighton are playing now. Sometimes you get, you got a guy 31 years old at Brighton outdoing Guardiola at Guardiola Bowl almost. So, like, you weren't seeing that back in the day. I can't name a manager I don't think there was a 31-year-old manager who came into the Premier League and was playing this style of level of football. So I think maybe when I hear and I get for instance, what Terry was saying earlier about Champions League and 4 teams that could win it, maybe because I'm looking from the other side, I'm like, that is true. And what is also true that the clubs on the other hand, on the other level, maybe the bottom half of the league, that level has risen. So like whenever I hear analysis, a lot of the times, whether it's Arsenal fans, Man United fans, whoever, for instance, they'll always say, we didn't beat Newcastle because we didn't play well. And I'm always like, you didn't beat Newcastle because Newcastle are a better team than they were before.
No, I agree with that. And I think you've had some really good balance of the conversation there as well. And I think that that's why I reject the notion that the Premier League's a farmers league, even though City won the most. The farmers league, I don't like when phrases get redefined. And farmers league always meant there was 1 or 2 very good teams, but the overall standard was trash. That's always what it meant. So everybody thought it to mean it. You look at Ligue 1 is like that. The amount of times you'll see PSG in a quarterfinals of the Champions League, they'll have a game on a Saturday in Ligue 1 and they will rotate 11 players.
Yeah.
You've never been able to do that in the Premier League. You can't do it in the Premier League. You will lose. And typically speaking, you'll lose or you're at big risk of dropping points. And
2 things could be true, Terry. 2 things could be true.
The
Premier League is a farmers league.
No, it's not what
Because
farmers league
is. Because if any other league had one team win it 4 or 5 times straight.
But that's not what we call. No, but we're redefining what the term farmers league always meant. Farmers league didn't mean one team always wins it. You can call it a league where one team has the monopoly, where one team is dominating, where one team is out, better than everybody else. What we're saying in England is in the English league, and I think Spain is a lot like this. I think Italy has become like this as well, is you can get a team in 10th place who will give a very hard game to the teams right at the top. I don't think if you go to Portugal, I don't think if you go to Scotland, I don't think if you go to France, that the teams mid-table and below give high-level competitive games week in, week out against the top sides. And this isn't a fan opinion. This comes from the players themselves. When they move to the Prem or they move to the Liga from those other leagues, when you listen to their interviews and their feedback, it's can't believe how hard it is. I remember Kai Havertz saying when he was at Chelsea that when you went away from home to a number of the teams in that league or played them at home, it was a relatively easy afternoon. Where he said in England, like every game is this massive battle. So for me, I just don't find a new word for it, but Farmers League typically means the overarching quality, once you go out the top 2 or 3, is severely lacking. And I don't think that's what the Premier League is. So then
every other league in the world is then a Farmers League according to Prem fans.
It's not that. The reason why it's not that is if you go through the list all right, so we talk about City turning into a Farmers League, quote unquote, right?
Okay.
Because they've won it so many times recently. But if you actually look at the times they've won it and you look at the seasons they've won it, Liverpool finished behind them twice by 1 point. Arsenal's finished behind them by 1 point once. A couple of times there's been bigger gaps. If you have a team that's winning it far and away, like I'm talking about a distance, they're winning it, wrapping up by April on a regular basis, then we can call it a Farmers League. But when you're being pushed to the limit, whether you get over the line or not, whether you're being pushed to the limit, and the fact that we can have a show, as this is called the Top 6 show, that shows that the level is not crap in the Premier League.
No, bro, but I'm not saying. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. So that's why I don't think it could be called a Farmers League. In the same way, I completely agree with what Toon Tactics was saying. Yes, you've got your levels like R9 and all that from back in the day, but name me an era R9 would have walked into and be the best player in the world in. There isn't one. So we're looking at the absolute best and comparing him to everyone else. Like Messi's another one. Messi walks into every era, but Messi's from this generation. The level at the top back in the day, in my opinion, was so far beyond the level of 10th place and down that these players look so amazing. Whereas now the levels are balancing out. So 10th place, you can't just walk to 10th place and get a 4-5-0 win easily. You're going to have to grind out a 1-0 or 2-1 win. Yeah. So the quote-unquote top players look more average now, but it's not the case. The average players of yesteryear are now better than ever. You've got players like Mbeumo at Brentford who's putting up double figures, like Wissa putting up double figures. That would never happen back in the day. Yeah. It's happening regularly now.
Do you know what, fellas? You know what? This season, I think, is going to really show it. Because ultimately, you've seen Arsenal drop off, you've seen Man City drop off. And I know you boys were talking about Liverpool being favourites, but ultimately the schedule is so busy. They're going to have their fighting time, and I reckon they're going to lose 3 or 4 games, to be fair, as well. And if you, I do, maybe not 5.
Let's not put that in the atmosphere.
Manifest that one. But I think, as all of the fellas have said, I think the standard in the league across the whole 18 clubs or whatever is so much higher than as you say, like the Farmers League in like Scotland with Celtic. And I think every game you've got to go and win. And I think this season you're really going to see that. And I see Liverpool losing. I see Arsenal losing more games, Man City losing more games, because the standard is higher. And when it comes down to the world class players, it is fun for us to talk about. We could talk about like Van Dijk being potentially the best centre half, but then he never played Henry, he never played Van Nistelrooy, he never played
Drogba or anyone like that.
Drogba. Like it's lovely for us to talk about, because we'd love to see it. But I think the standard is better than it's ever been. And I just think the levels between the world class players is not as defined as it was.
I hear that. I think you see this in a lot of sports though as well. I hear a comment saying that the standards have never been so low from her. I know Kopish Cow watches a lot of MMA like I do. The fighters now are of such a high level across the mixture of the arts. So when MMA first started, and probably from the early 90s right through really until maybe sort of 2010, it was quite a while, you would have, this guy's a great boxer, this guy's a great kickboxer, this guy's an amazing wrestler, he's a great grappler. You had a handful of people that could mix a couple of those disciplines together. The last 15 years, what you have started to see is people that are so multifaceted, to a point where I've got a good friend who's in the UFC, Michael Page, who's just recently went and won. He did it via the UFC. He went and won a grappling fight, and they kind of did it to shake a grapple. Now, he is not a world-class grappler by any means, but he can grapple as a striker. He grapples to a level now that is probably superior to that of all of the non-grapplers in the previous sort of 20-odd years, because of the way the standards have gone up. However, it doesn't take away from that era. It's just training's different. And this is why I sort of disagree when it comes back to looking at eras. You look at the way like football YouTube works, just the industry we're all in. There's a lot more competition now, but the reason why it's easier for an up-and-coming creator to start making content is because people like Red Men TV, AFTV, the United Stand, and a few others that have been around a long time, they have paved the way and have shown people how to do it. Yeah. So when someone starts their own channel,
bring yourself in there as well.
Maybe the Football Terrace goes in there, but it's like panel shows. We were the first channel to start doing panel shows, especially covering multiple clubs as an example. Now everyone does them, and there's no issue with that whatsoever. But the point is, some people might go, "Oh, that channel over there is so much better than the Football Terrace," and I can accept the criticism. However, without channels like mine that started these, there's other. They might have thought of the idea themselves and started doing it, but it wouldn't exist. And by the way, we didn't invent podcasts. They were happening in other industries before us. So I'm not sitting here and pretending that I came up with the concept of a podcast, or any of these people did. But I always feel like you've got to pay a little homage to what came before you in any industry, in any walk of life, because what we all do, and I do this as well, is we all essentially stand upon the shoulders of giants and then try and take things to that next level. And it typically gets easier.
Now, I was going to add to that. I also think, and maybe because it's the younger generation that watch the clips from before, because they always see clips of the great players, whether it's Ronaldo or whatnot, like going past 5 different players. They think that's what the whole every game was like that, because they always say, it's system based now. It's system based. There's always a system. Like since football was invented, there was always a system, and so it's not like people were just freestyling and dribbling and kicking the ball over people's heads like through the whole course of the 90 minutes. That's just highlights that you're seeing. If you see these games from 0 to 90 minutes, overall standards isn't much different to what it is now, probably even a drop-off, but you've obviously had magical players like a Ronaldo creating those magical movements. Yeah. Yes, you can see Roberto Carlos bending the ball, almost going away from the goal. Watch that whole game for the 90 minutes. And then tell me, that was Zidane scoring that incredible volley against Leverkusen in the final. I watched that game. that game wasn't the greatest game. It was that magical moment that made it what it is. So
yeah, you look at
that's what we're
R9's.
talking
Also, I
about.
want to say R9. R9's a great example. All of us know how good he was, and I am not playing him down. I'm playing devil's advocate here for anyone who wants to click this up or cry. If he was playing today, there would be people that would call him a fraud when it comes to Champions League football. He never won the trophy. He made 40 appearances, only got 14 goals in the competition. Now, again, he played in an era where the UEFA Cup was a much higher standard than it is now, where he also scored 15 goals. But the point is, if he played now and his career went exactly the same, people would turn around and say, yeah, but what's he doing in the Champions League? What's he done in this competition? What about this? People would start, again, what the previous generations didn't suffer with. People say now stats elevate players to a higher level, and I can understand that. But equally, the holes in no one when I was growing up knew that Henry never scored in the final.
Yeah.
None of us thought about it because the information wasn't readily available. Now we know. It's like, oh, bloody hell, that's a mad one. However, if all that information was readily available 20 years ago, that would have probably been labeled against Henry and the conversations would have happened. So you could argue in this era, it's even harder to get recognized because the level of scrutiny you face is probably more intense now than any other generation of football players have ever gone through.
It's how you remember it. It's that with Ibra, right? Right. People always bring the saying of, okay, cool, he scored this many goals. What's his UCL? Was European medal? And bro, bro, people forget that Zlatan scored an overhead kick. I think in the 06, I think it was. I wrong on here. Bro, that goal is considered one of the greatest goals of all time. And if you look at players like Steven Gerrard, right? Callum, how many times have you heard a phrase where
overrated?
Overrated. It's a title. No.
Behave, Terry, man. Behave.
Don't fight, Ram. Don't fight, Ram.
Because I see on Twitter, right? People disrespecting Gerrard because they didn't do a prem. Brother, he literally carried Liverpool to come back from 3-0 down against AC Milan, and then they.
You might be the best. You might be the best Man United fan I've spoken to. No, speak to anyone else. And just say, do you think Harry?
I need to let Harry know this is his last appearance on the Football Terrace.
Keep cooking, Harry. Keep cooking, bro.
I think that the youth of today, right? I'm talking younger than myself, right? I've seen 11 and 12-year-olds looking at Erling Haaland.
You're 12.
No.
I thought you said you were 12. Jesus Christ.
No. I'm seeing people in like year 7 watching Haaland, Mbappe, Cole Palmer, and I'm like, rah, they are like unreal. Brother, I watched the whole career of Eden Hazard. Yeah, our whole career of Mesut Ozil in an Arsenal shirt. Bro, Arsenal fans don't know more than me. The day he signed for Arsenal, Sky Sports deadline, and Arsenal fans were like, yeah, we're live on telly. Yeah, bro, we've seen players who you define as world class, right? And in their own right, they are. But I think the youth of today, in my personal opinion, are starting to tarnish that word of world class because they're putting players in who are bro, Cole Palmer, like 21 to 22, and it's being deemed world class of scoring 4 goals in one half. It's like, bro, a term world class means that, bro, you are like unreal. You're doing things that are unheard of, and you don't need accomplishments to prove it. Ibra, but again, I want to what Toon Tactics said about the whole Brentford Newcastle thing, because bro, you had told me
just Brentford
Newcastle in the 2020s being the UCL. I'm like, yeah, nah, mate, no, ain't happening. But bro, it happened.
Yeah. But I would say on the world class
Can I
thing,
say
it's not the 12 and 15-year-olds, it's the 30-year-olds that are shocking me. Troy Deeney saying Mo Salah is not world class. I've seen people on the panel saying, so it's not the 12-year-olds. They're just listening to what the older lot are saying. So that's what always amazes me about that. And I think I don't mind. You got to define what your terms for class is. Like for me, it's a little bit. It's different from like legends. Like you just mentioned legends earlier, Badger and stuff like that. I think world class isn't necessarily like static. It can move like almost like a Premier League table, but over a consistent period of time. So just because Eden Hazard was maybe world class for 3-4 years, when he was at Real Madrid, he definitely wasn't world class. He wasn't available to be world class in the first place. Do you know what I mean? So I think it goes back and forwards, and it depends on what that period of time is, really.
Can I just say something? Yeah, I think.
Sorry.
Sorry. Do you know who I think are the real beneficiaries of this though? Is the youngsters where that we talk about legends and watching them on YouTube. Where I remember I was growing up, and they were talking about these people over in Spain. And you couldn't even get a game. You couldn't watch a game on TV.
Exactly.
Like you couldn't go to YouTube. So you talk about the standards, potentially dropping, but ultimately it's only going to rise because I remember watching, like trying to watch Ronaldinho and going like trying to copy his skills because you see little bits, but you couldn't see it all the time. Where these kids can just go on YouTube and go, oh, this player, I'm going to watch Erling Haaland. Let's see what he does. Let's see his movement. Yeah. And the next 10, 15 years, it's only going to get better because they've got the access to actually see and watch it day in, day out, or go on YouTube or get it back on. It's only going to be more exciting. I think football's only going to get better and better and better. And that gap's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think in the end, it's going to peak.
Yeah.
No,
I want to say that.
I agree.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jerry.
No, go on, mate. Go on. I was just saying I agree. Go on, mate.
Now, I was gonna say I don't think that what Deeney said is anything that's wrong. Like I'm not sure how old he is, but he's probably comparing it to, again, like that tweet said with the names with the players that are world class from.
No, he's comparing it to his kid. He literally said, "I wouldn't want my kid to play like him."
Well, so
he's younger than Modric.
But what I'm saying is he's probably grown up watching players that he views as world class, and then he's seeing what we call world class now.
He's a Vinicius Junior.
Yeah,
he's a Vinicius Junior.
I don't think Troy's older than Terry.
Well, I don't know how old he is.
Modric.
I'm not too sure how old he is.
Look, I'm going to go to some of these super chats here. First one says, although the level of teams across the league has improved, the level of individual footballer has declined, in my opinion. But this is the question, though, has been made. If the overall level improves, does that stop? Do we have a lot more bigger fishes in a much bigger pond, as opposed to a number of big fishes in a much smaller pond with a lot of tiddlers, so they stood out a little bit more? Perspective is really, really important. You could have I had a friend at school. It was Ashley White, and this kid was the fastest kid in our school. He could run 100 meters faster than anybody else. Then we went to the districts, and he came last. He didn't look fast at districts. He looked really slow. At district level, he looked slow because he was suddenly up against people that were quicker than him. Perspective is key. For me personally, bringing AC Milan back to the top holds so much more weight than winning the Champions League with PSG. I would like to see him build like Klopp did. It's a very, very, very good point there, Nick. I don't think he'll do it, but I would like to see him do that as well. I do agree with you. At some point, science and evolution has to factor in and emotions put to the side. If all world-class 11s now played, you could probably get, with fitness and standards like that, there is an argument to say a team like Brighton could beat some of the greatest teams from the 50s, 60s, and 70s purely on fitness and being able to run faster and everything else. So that's it depends on the rules, though. If you let them tackle like they did in the 70s, every team today loses. You let them tackle like it's the 70s, everyone loses. George Best at halftime would down a few pints of beer and smoke 2 cigarettes and then put on a clinic context. This is true. There was a great story about Georgie Best that I read where he turned up to a game. He was so drunk. He crashed his car into the side of the changing room. Crashed his car, went in, scored hat-trick, went home, woke up the next day and had to read the papers to even realize if he played or not. That era was a madness, bruv. That era was a madness. What separates this era from others is the emphasis on stats has reached a tipping point. People just pull out spreadsheets now in every database. I think stats play a part, but one thing I always say about attackers anyway is all the guys we mention as legends, they all have fucking good stats, don't they? They all have very good GA.
Yeah.
Like, what I don't like is someone who gets called world class where their GA is awful, because I just think, how can you be a world class attacker with no end product? That's the most important thing you do.
But
If I met
on that, Ted, just before you
Go on,
move
mate.
on, I fully agree with that super chat in the sense that stats have to be contextualized, but the eye test is subjective as well.
Yeah.
What I like in a footballer, someone else might dislike. So again, you have to merge the two together. It can't just be one or the other.
Of course, subjectivity comes into it. Otherwise, Henry wouldn't have a misses. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just one of them things that happens.
That is unreal.
If I met Troy, I would ask him if his kids love Lewandowski, and if they agree, I would consider them world class. Love for Team Kopish is from Red Indian. Also, here says Callum, what's your take on Mo Salah not mentioned on the overlap as being the best player of the decade?
Yes, it's their opinion, man. Like, it's their opinion. Carragher's doing a thing at the moment. It feels as though where he's overcompensated so he doesn't come across biased as a Liverpool fan. And Gary Neville's seen Man United players who could be in that conversation. So he's going to kind of root for those guys because he played in teams with some of those guys. So, it is what it is.
Yeah, I hear you. Moving on from that topic, Arsenal could be on the brink, Callum, that's Guna Callum, of bringing in Luís Campos to be your new director of football. How big and an important move do you think that could be for Arsenal Football Club?
Well, I think we need to get someone in because we ain't got anyone at the moment. So I think it's a positive move. I think obviously Eddie going is sort of devastating, but I think that was always in the plans anyway. But I think if he does come in, it's good news. It just see if he hits the ground running. It's like anything else, and it's like having a new manager come in. You've got to give him time to bed in and see what he brings. But ultimately, it's we've got to move forward, and I think it's just seeing what he can do and what he brings in, really. But I do think Edu leaving is going to be a big miss, and I think there is going to be a time where a transition period ultimately. But I think next summer is going to be the big one of who they bring in and how he gets on with Arteta. I think the relationship with Arteta is massive. So if he can fit in with Arteta and Arteta buys into what he wants and they can collaborate well, Arsenal's
Can I ask
still on the up.
Can I ask you if you think it should be the other way around though? Because I was watching another podcast, I think, around the Arteta situation, and the feeling was that maybe earned, but he's maybe got too much control in at Arsenal, and it'll be better to have a sporting director, because the whole point of a sporting director is to essentially carry the whole vision of the club, short, medium to long term, so long as they're there. A manager's their word for the short term, if anything. If so, the point being is, if Arteta was to leave or get sacked today, it wouldn't matter. The sporting director will be able to bring in a manager who will continue the vision of that club. So, I mean, we had the whole situation. I mentioned this because we had the whole situation with Eddie Howe and our new sporting director. Wouldn't it be a worry if your owners are only recruiting a sporting director who fits in with Arteta rather than a sporting director who carries on their vision? Therefore, Arteta fits in with them.
I would like to think Arsenal have learned from what's happened after Arsene. Personally, I think they're going to get someone who does both ultimately, and I think this guy, from what I've heard, is going to fit both. I think obviously you can't bring a sporting director in that's not going to get on with the manager long term anyway. And let's be honest, Arteta has signed a long term deal, so I can't see him getting the sack, and I think he's arguably earned that right as well with what he's done. Because let's be honest, before Arteta's come in, it was a not a very nice place to there was no joy at Arsenal, and I think he has turned that around. I think.
Wouldn't you not be concerned that Edu possibly left for some of those reasons, that he doesn't have the same level of control that he may have would have liked? And obviously he's been there the same. He recruited Arteta, am I wrong? Or did he come after Arteta?
No,
like if you got sporting directors continuously being chopped down because Arteta doesn't like them, that would be a worry for the overall structure of Arsenal, wouldn't it? If it's all based on Arteta.
It's got to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's a worry, but I think Arsenal. I think Arteta is long term. I genuinely do think he is going to be long term.
I mean, he's been there like 4.5 years already.
Yeah,
but he's a manager. He's not. That's what I'm saying. He's not he can't be your club structure. It can't be on this one guy. He can't decide. It's like the chain of command is backwards almost. It's the manager telling the sporting director what the vision of the club is.
Toon, can I just quickly ask, what if the philosophy is already there at the club? It's already been established.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah.
They just need to get someone to go in that can.
So then, why does it matter what Arteta thinks? Then why does it matter what he thinks? Then he's the manager, like he's an employee. So then, why does it matter what he thinks about who they're hiring? They should be bringing in somebody that, regardless of if Arteta's the manager or not, it doesn't affect anything. I just don't get what the hype is in terms of why is that the manager that Arsenal are just so reliant on, making it seem like he's like their version of Sir Alex Ferguson or something when he hasn't won anything except for FA Cup with Unai Emery's squad before he spent $700 million. I think, like Callum, for you saying that he's long term, I do agree because he did get an extension, but I think that was the wrong move as well. I think he should have never gotten a new big contract because it's been off the back of doing nothing. And then you brought up about how
I disagree. I disagree.
That Arsenal have had no success. I mean, what's different from before Arteta came in? Because Luis Wenger there for about 20-something years. There's top 4 Champions League, FA Cup. Then Wenger wasn't there for a year and a half. You had Unai Emery, who had you 8th? I think he came 5th his first year, and then he was 6th. He was either 7th or 8th when he was sacked, November or something like that. And then you guys bring in Arteta, and it's still kind of more so the same. Now you're just coming in 2nd or 3rd, but it's no real.
It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. It's nonsense. I'm sorry, the club's a completely different club. If you look at the fan base, I think the fan base was lost. And I think I don't know if any of you go to away games, but the Emirates is a completely different place. He's got the full, from most of the fans, I would say he's got full backing. He's completely changed the structure, the ethos, I think there's more love towards the club than it has ever been. Especially.
So, what do you think of a situation where Arteta says, "I want," like he did last? There is a bit of tension around the whole, for instance, Kai Havertz situation. Like, whose idea? I don't mind either way, but whose idea was it to bring in Kai Havertz? Was it Edu's or was it Arteta's? And in the future, if Campos says, "I want a player," I think I might give you a list of players A, B, and C. And Arteta says, "I don't want A, B, or C. I want D. I want this player." Is it Arteta that gives that final sign off, or is it the sporting director? I mean, who supervises who essentially?
The thing is, we're talking. Yeah, we're talking like these are businessmen. Yeah, ultimately they're doing a job. They're going to be sitting around a table and discussing. They're going to do what's best for the team, aren't they? So Arteta is only going to want players who is going to fit his philosophy and the philosophy that the team are playing. So whoever they get in, they're going to be meeting daily and having them conversations. It's not like, it's a guy sitting up in an office who every so often rings down and goes, "Oh, how much money do you want, mate?" I
hear what you're saying, Cal, but there's no way Luís Campos, who built that Monaco team with Bernardo Silva, Fabinho, Mbappe, Thomas Lemar, and that Lille side, he does not take the Arsenal job unless he has complete control. And this is one of the reasons why PSG at the moment are a little bit rocky, because Mbappe's gone and they're putting all their eggs in Ousmane Dembele. If he walks into Arsenal, he runs the football club now. Arteta's just the coach. That's what Man City did when Sixty Birkenstein come in. And that's what Liverpool have done with Slot when Edwards has come in. And that's what Madrid do. Like, Ancelotti's not the top don. Everyone answers to Perez. And you may need to go down that route, because at the moment it kind of seems that Arteta is kind of doing what the Fergusons and the Wengers were doing in the years ago, where you're managing the whole thing. That if Edu's come out in August and said, Arsenal fans, be excited for the end of the window, for him then to leave 4 months later, that to me, that tells me internally there's been some sort of a disagreement at board level where we don't know. Has Arteta got too much reign? Because you look at the modern day the modern day coach, if Erik ten Hag took over Man United, say 2 years further down the line where they are now, I think he does a much better job to the job he walks into because the hierarchy is completely different. And they've actually got an entire recruitment, completely different football club. Like if you employ Luís Campos, who's got a track record of pulling out hidden gems, who has built up football clubs, I don't think he works at PSG because they are already there. But Arsenal are trying to get over the line. If you bring in him, who's got one of the best talent IDs up there of Ralph Rangnick, I think personally your transfer window massively improves.
But this is the thing, right? It's such a fine line because you can't just bring in some random person to come into not sort of transform, but implement what Arsenal want to do in terms of getting over that line and winning Premier League titles. Because for me, from what I can see from an outsider point of view, Arsenal's philosophy, the way they play, style, everything is all there. It's just trying to execute it so they can get over the line. And the thing is, the most important thing is whether the DOF can work with the manager. And I think it's a massive point in the sense of, you look at Michael Edwards, the only reason why Michael Edwards came back is because Jurgen Klopp decided to leave. That's where Klopp no longer had a lot more power and Edwards had all the reins. And the same with Cheeky. The difference with Cheeky is that Cheeky and Guardiola, they both work so well because they have similar ideas of football.
Yeah, but you're dismantling your own point. Like, I think you're dismantling your own point. The reason why Liverpool have a structure is because of Michael Edwards. And then when Klopp went over his head and went to your owners, instead of getting Bruno Gomares, you got, I think, I forgot the gentleman's name that was injured all the time. For instance, in that situation, your whole club went downhill. You had players that were, your midfield, you had to buy 3 new midfielders, courtesy of our owners in Saudi Arabia. And so now you're in a situation where you had to bring Michael Edwards back. I suspect Klopp left because the owners told him we want Michael Edwards back. And to regain that structure, then that's what happens when you just have a manager that's in charge of everything.
I do agree. I've been very impressed with how Arsenal have rebuilt themselves from where they were, and I think that sometimes, Standard FC exists, and people talk about how, rebuilds. I've heard people say recently about Man United, rebuilds are a nonsense. Rebuilds shouldn't exist. You should expect your team to win straight away. I can understand that if Man United's rebuild we're doing right now started in the summer of 2014 or maybe 2015. We're only 2 years earlier. The squad was winning Premier Leagues. When you were off the pace for as long as Arsenal were, and I think when you were running the club in a way that was antiquated, as in a manager running the club, it was always going to take time to restructure yourself in the right way. And I think that you had a good balance. And one of the reasons why I sort of, when I said this, it went crazy viral, but I said Arsenal scare me, is because I felt it was win-win. I felt their structure and the way they were heading meant they were going to win the big trophies with Arteta. Or if he gets close like he has done and it doesn't quite work, if you were running it like a modern-day football club, like the majority of football teams do, where you have a head coach and you have a director of football or a director of sport, whatever it may be, sporting director that kind of runs the club on a day-to-day level, even if Arteta fails to get you over the line, it becomes a plug-and-play solution. A better head coach comes in and you continue the journey. I've heard some people say that the whole club is being built. Some Arsenal fans, Igao is one of them. The whole club is being built in the sort of ideology of Arteta. What should worry a Gooner about that is, let's just say you do win something and then he leaves. You're at the beginning of it, where he wins or whether he fails. It means when he leaves, you've got to rebuild again. That for me is ridiculous because it means you have to build everything again as soon as, and he ain't going to be at your club forever. He just won't be at your club forever. I just don't think it's going to happen personally.
Can I just say something?
I don't think you should be giving Arteta much more power. I think that if you look at the way all the successful clubs in the world are run in the last 30 years, taking out Man United with Fergie, managers running the whole football club doesn't yield success anymore and hasn't done for a long, long time. Barring Fergie doing it.
Terry, can I just say something? Yeah, can I just say something? One second. Yeah, you talk about the Wenger era. Yeah, let's not talk about the glory days. Let's talk about that time in between first year. Like, you got to remember, we were paying off a stadium. We were still getting Champions League football with people like Senderos playing. Yeah, like we were going for a period of time where they were trying to basically just leveled the club out. We weren't looking at winning nothing, let's be honest. It was just about getting top 4 because we needed the money to be able to pay other things off. So I think it's a bit harsh to go, Wenger, like the rebuild. He stabilised the club because we were in financial problems with the ground, and we tried to do it the right way, and not buy the league or spend money that we ain't got and all that sort of stuff. But we don't want to go down that route. But in the sense of Arteta, I think at the end of the day, he's the man. They backed him. They prolonged his contract. Yes, I do agree that potentially, if he wins something, or let's be honest, I think he does eventually want to go to Barcelona or go back to Spain. I'm not stupid. I do generally see that. But the club have got enough knowledge now to have that conversation behind closed doors. You don't think if this bloke comes in that Arteta's already spoken to him about the long-term project, or he's spoken to Arteta about the long-term project that he wants? Like you're talking about millions of pounds. Like you're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds. Them conversations have had and been had. And I think Edu has left, for whatever reason. Personally, I think he's been offered a ridiculous amount of money. Yeah. He also might think that he's taken Arsenal as far as he can. Yeah. And maybe, he can't see how they can get him over the line. I'm just throwing it out there. I do think it is a shame that he has left, and I do think that he could have gone and pushed us over that edge. But ultimately, I think the conversations had, I think he could be a good appointment, and I think long term, I think Arteta knows, and the club knows what they're going to do already in the summer. And I think next season you'll see it. Personally, I know, it is. Don't get me wrong. It is a worrying time. When I heard that Edu was going, I was thinking, "Oh, that's it. We're in big trouble here."
See, Cal, I see it the other way, bruv. Sorry to interject, bruv. I see it the other way. I think him leaving, if you bring in someone like a Luís Campos or someone of that level, I think Arsenal are going to get better. I think this is good for you. I think Edu took you as far as he can, and that's not a dig. I really do think when I saw people laughing about this, I didn't see this as a bad thing at all. The worst thing you can do though is give more power to Arteta, and I'm not digging Arteta out. I say this because I don't think the modern day head coach or manager, whatever phrase, are taught and trained how to run football clubs. Genuinely, Pep does not know how to run a football club. Ancelotti doesn't know how his experience. They're not trained like the Fergies and the Wengers and the Brian Cloughs were. Especially managers that are not brought up in the sort of British culture, because it wasn't being done. I don't know how it hasn't really been done in Spain, in Germany. The club has always been run by presidents and directors, and a head coach came in. It was quite unique to England, I believe. Maybe some other countries did it as well, but it was very unique to England to train sort of managers up to run football clubs. That's why I think it's dangerous to do it, because most of our coaches now in England are not English and not British because they're not good enough. Therefore, you're bringing in people that come from a culture where head coaches do things. I feel like there's a bit of an arrogance, and Man United have had that, where managers think, I can run a club. I can do this. I can do what Fergie did. And every single one of them have. But Jose Mourinho didn't really run football clubs, I don't think.
No, I think they're the kind of last two of that era. Like,
maybe Carlo can, but maybe
Terry, I think that you're not factoring in that some of these players might leave. So I get what you're saying in terms of, well, if Arteta leaves, then you should just have a structure where the next manager, then he gets to inherit the squad. But then, how long does Saliba wait? How long does Isak wait? Or any of these guys? Hold on, bro.
Listen, you make a fantastic point, and this is, I think, all Arsenal fans' biggest fear. And I honestly do believe we need to win something this season, otherwise we will get.
I say let them leave.
I mean, I'd love to say that, yeah, but then who are you going to get in? I'm not being funny. People like Saliba, Gabriel.
You're Arsenal Football Club. You're bigger than Saliba. You're bigger than Gabriel. Those players weren't nothing until they came to you guys. You developed them in the first place.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, who do you go and get to come in? I'd like to think the club.
Well, that's what you got Campos for. That's what you got Sporting Director for.
This is what I was about to say. I was just about to say, I like to think the club have already thinking ahead and they've already planned for this. And like you say, in the summer, they've got names that they want. The same as, I'd like to think they've already got a name for a manager if Arteta was to leave or to get the sack, because ultimately they're running a multi-million-pound business. Yeah. So, but I do think we could potentially lose out on big players if we don't win something this season. And again, I know you just highlighted, I like to think that we've also got a contingency plan that backs us to then push on with this new bloke coming in potentially. But again, it's all about results, isn't it? And it's about Arteta doing it on the pitch or getting the players to do it on the pitch. And I think, it is an exciting time for Arsenal, but it's also a time that could be turbulent. And it all depends on what happens in the next 6-7 months, isn't it?
I think he's here to. I think I'll be excited if I was an Arsenal fan. I think he's here to guide Arteta, not the other way around. The problem is Arteta and Edu played on the same team together. They look at each other as peers rather than I'm the sporting director. This is the vision of the club. It's almost like two peers arguing: shall we buy Havertz? Shall we not buy Havertz? Rather than a Campos who's here to tell him, I'm the one discovered Mbappe. I'm the one who built up Monaco. There's a guidance there. I think there's a longer term, and the owner's getting him in. I think they're looking more longer term. And I think if Arteta's wise enough, and I kind of relate it to Eddie Howe as well, he'll be wise enough to listen to the advice that he's been given through Campos in terms of the longer structure for the club and the players they're going to bring in. I think that will give him longevity and probably more likelihood to win trophies. But if Arteta says, this is my way, this is my club's philosophy, these are the players I want, that's when I think it will bring a lot more problems for Arsenal that needs to be there.
But I don't think that Arteta can necessarily look long term. Yeah, he did sign an extension, but I don't think he has that much more time left. Like he must win now. And I think that a lot of Arsenal fans are kind of not necessarily wanting to point that out. Like this, heading into this season, Arsenal had the most pressure on them, right? They were the team that were expected to be usurping Man City, not what Liverpool are doing at the moment. So yeah, Luís Campos could be brought in and, lead Arsenal in terms of the director of football role and looking over the operations of things for like the next 10 years. But Arteta needs to win stuff now. This guy's already spent over 700 million. So he doesn't necessarily have the same time frame that a Luís Campos would, because Luís Campos would just be coming in after Arteta's already been here for about 4.5 years. So that's kind of where I'm saying in terms of I don't think it's going to necessarily work out, because with all the money that he's already spent and he's still not been able to get you over the line, maybe you should have let him go at the end of maybe like last season or the season before, and then you could have brought in maybe a more proven manager that can then take over this squad versus.
Yeah, I think Arsenal fans will be in for a shock if Arteta don't win something this year. I don't think they are. I personally don't think they
a Carabao or FA Cup, Terry. They're talking about the Prem and the Champions League.
Who are you referring to here, Will?
You want me name drop?
No. I mean, you mean the fans or the owners? Are you talking about?
No. I'm talking about the fans. Just like fans, I think that the expectations heading into this season was for Arsenal to win a Prem or a Champions League.
No, I understand that. But look, I think if Arsenal were to win, say, the FA Cup, come second by a point or two, do well in the Champions League, I think Arteta gets another season, because you're there or thereabouts and you've won a trophy. And I think that's fair, right? Because trophies are what you're aiming for at the end of the day. But I think Arsenal fans who think the club is being built in Arteta's image and he's to a degree untouchable, I don't think that's the case. I think you've built a modern day structure that will live on beyond Arteta, where he's an important component because head coaches are. But I think he's like they use this word in technology. He's a white label solution. If he leaves for whatever reason, somebody else can come in and do. I don't look at it and think who else can do what he does. We've seen Slot go into Liverpool, and they look better than they probably did in the last 2 years under Jurgen Klopp. I think I think Alonso is a manager that could come in and could do. And I'm not saying he is. Some will say he's better than Arteta. Some will say he isn't. But I think he could come into an Arsenal team that's full of quality players. You've got to remember, you're not a toxic club anymore. If Arteta leaves at the end of the season, and say it was Alonso that was to come in as an example, into an excellent squad, a club that's been spending money, that's got a great attitude and a great atmosphere, he could take you guys over the line. Now, I don't think, again, I'm not one of these people that would then, I don't believe in then using that as a hammer to beat Arteta over the head with, because Arteta has helped to get you to a point where somebody else can come in and get you over the line. But I think in the modern day game, what football fans have got to learn to do is to, and I know it's hard for Arsenal fans, especially as old as you are, Callum, because you're similar age to me, mate. We were married to our managers because we had 25 years of the same person. I think we have to learn to respect them and enjoy them and back them to a degree, but we don't need to be married to them, because if your club is well structured and well run, you survive beyond that manager. How do we know this? It's how the Real Madrid, it's how the Bayern Munich, it's how all the top European clubs have been run for 50, 60, 70 years. And the only reason the Ajaxes of this world aren't what they were in the 90s is because of the financial difficulties their country has had footballing wise compared to the Premier League. And as long as there's money in the EPL, if you structure yourself in that way, you won't fall off. The clubs that have actually failed in the Premier League in the last 10 years on a massive level are the ones that weren't structured correctly at the beginning of the decade. The Man Uniteds of this world, Arsenal to a degree, even Chelsea, and they had Roman that spent, but the world changed. You couldn't just spend your way to the top anymore because loads of fuckers had money. You had to have a bit more of a continuity of style and structure and a core group. I think if you've got money and you operate that way, you outlive any manager. You're just you're a going concern as opposed to, oh my God, what do we do in Arteta leagues? What do we do in Amorim leagues? Oh, no Real Madrid fan sits there and says, we're fucked when Ancelotti goes because they know they're not. They know they're not. They just bring the next head coach in to manage a very talented group of players. And I think that's what we should all be asking our clubs to do in the modern day era rather than focusing on one man. And that's not a dig at Arteta because I've said it about Ten Hag at my club. I still think he's going to go on and do some good stuff elsewhere. It doesn't make you a bad coach. It just means now's the right time to maybe move on. I want to do some of these super chats here. First one says, random fact, Modric tonight against, I can't read, Portugal playing his 84th game for Croatia. Fuck me. He has now played in 58% of all games in Croatian history. That is crazy. Crazy stat. He's building the foundation to success. But Daniel, the foundation for Arsenal's built. The foundation is built. The house is built. Exactly. The furniture's in. The windows, the surround sound's in. The house is done. It's now about running your house right, bruv. And right now, the kids are being a bit naughty. Do you know what I'm saying? So,
Terry, can I just say something on that, though?
Get the switch out. Go on, mate. Go on.
We have always historically been run well. If you look behind closed doors, or behind the doors, we've always been run and financially run well. It's not like we've had to, take millions here or sponsor ourselves here or do whatever you've got to do here. We've always run the club well, and like I said, that's where Arsene Wenger stabilised us through that time where we were paying everything off instead of doing these craziness. So I think behind doors, I've never had an issue. We've always been run, never been in debt, never been in massive trouble other than the stadium. Sorry, but we've completely paid that off. We've always run it behind closed doors exceptionally. If you look at you look at any stats, any books, they always say Arsenal's one top club. That's why we've never been relegated. But I think with Arteta, I just want to say, like you say about we need to win something, and I generally do think we need to win something. I do think we need to win one of the big trophies at some point. But also, I don't think, if we don't, I don't think Arteta's going to get the sack because we've gone from. Oh, no, that's ridiculous, mate. Sorry, that's a ridiculous comment. But
4.5 years,
we've gone.
Don't gotta
but
win.
We were never competing before. Let's be honest,
but it's not even about
a point. But at least we're now actually competing. But we're now actually competing. We're in a position to compete. We're in a position to actually, win the league or, have a point where someone else will win it. Like we're now in a position where we are competing where before we weren't. We were just floating. Yeah, and I think Arteta will win something, and I think it will be in the next 2 years. But I don't think it's
but it's like what Terry said in terms of if Arteta wins the FA Cup, he'll get another year. So I'm not even talking about the Champions League or Prem. I'm talking about he just needs to win something. Period. I don't care if it's the Carabao Cup, FA Cup. You have to bring in silverware. You can't keep going seasons without winning anything and then spending all this money.
What if Arnie Slot wins the league?
Hold on. But no.
Title, then what does that say about Arteta for him to come in his first year in a Liverpool
he won't.
So Liverpool have a more proven squad, Henry. Like Mo Salah, Van Dijk, Trent. These are players that have won the Prem, have won Champions Leagues. So Slot has inherited a side that's already battle tested, and I think that's where I would give Arsenal and Arteta a little bit more grace because I think it does look bad if Slot comes in his first year and then wins the league, but he's also been handed a much more proven squad than what Arteta has right now.
But he's got a better squad.
But bang on. But that's why. But that's why the thing is, we can't all sit here and say that Arsenal have to have a model where if Arteta gets close to the line and then moves on, another manager comes in and gets them over the line. Say Arteta wins nothing this year, and then Alonso comes in, and wins the Premier League in his first season. That for me isn't, I told you Arteta was crap. Equally, that isn't then an embarrassment for all the other managers who have been in the Premier League longer than Alonso. I think I might have said, I don't know if I said Alonso, but like, it's this, you can't look at it that way. Slot has walked into a team full of world-class players and winners who have won major trophies. Liverpool are more successful than Arsenal in the last 8 years, and he has picked up an excellent going concern and got them over the line. I don't think Slot winning, a lot of people want it to be the stick to beat Arteta over the head with. I'm not sure if it is. On that, though, because we are going to run out of time, but I want to ask about Isak. More reports today, Toon Tactics, that Isak could be sold by yourselves. Arsenal were a club that want him. Do you see that happening in January or in the summer, or do you think Isak will stay at Newcastle? What's your take, bro?
I'll be aware of my own biases. I'll first say it will stay at Newcastle. In terms of the sources, I think obviously it's trying to speak objectively. Arsenal are a big club. It's not. You know, Liverpool had to sell Coutinho, Man United had to sell Ronaldo. People sell players all the time. In terms of the sources, my understanding of it was this all sprung from the whole Gordon deal. Gordon got a deal. And then the natural order of things, there was a journalist that said, okay, Newcastle aren't kind of going to be talking to Isak just yet, but there is some murmurings of what they might talk about a new contract, but they're not in a push to do it because he's still got 3 or 4 years left. From that, his camp then spoke to another journalist called Craig Hopin at Newcastle and said, well, we're not speaking to Newcastle because we don't know if we're going to get Champions League. And then that's when the whole situation with kind of Arsenal kind of began to kind of grow as well. That's not to say that this isn't happening, but this is just my interpretation of kind of seeing journalists coming along. In terms of January, I don't see it happen. If these things were serious and it was concrete, I don't see it happening in January unless Arsenal had. I think even if Arsenal, if you're looking at January, you're looking at to make Newcastle to pick up the phone, you're looking at 130, 140 million plus in January. I don't think anyone wants to do that kind of outlay in January. And I think I'll be more worried if it was Chelsea than if it was Arsenal, because I think Chelsea have more things to bargain with in terms of player plus cash deals, first choice and maybe academy players and stuff like that. But if Arsenal really wanted Isak, it wouldn't be in January. If they wanted to get a good run up on him, it'll probably be in the summer. But again, it would have to be an offer that Newcastle would force Newcastle to sit down, and then they'd have to hope that, I don't know, Chelsea, Man United, Bayern Munich, whoever don't also come in with a similar offer for him as well, like a Declan Rice sort of situation. But I think, and I'd like to think, and again, my own biases, I think hopefully the more likely outcome is that Isak renews his contract in the summer and continues to play for Newcastle, as did Anthony Gordon, Bruno Gomes, Joe Linton, and others.
I still don't think personally that Isak is the right striker for Arsenal. I think they've got to get Gyökeres. I think Isak is a top striker, but I think Gyökeres has just got something that he kind of gives me like a little bit of the Haaland vibe, where he could just come in and score 30 league goals. And I think Toon Tactics, what is how is his injury record as bad as some people say, or do you think that's just over exaggerated with his?
They could just look up on FotMob or SofaScore. I think last season he was out for about 6 weeks to a month, to 2 months maybe, but then he played the rest of the time. And that's mainly because we can't rotate with Callum Wilson and others, and we had Champions League and it was horrific last season. This season he's only been out for about 3 or 4 weeks, and that's because of a toe injury or whatnot. But otherwise he's been fit and firing. I think people are overplaying it. I think I'll be more careful. Maybe I lean heavily towards Premier League proven players. It's not to say that Gyökeres can't make it, but Portuguese league is, if you look at Opta stats, for instance, it's like the 5th, 6th league. I mean, and I think he has a lot to prove. Say that again?
His record in the Europa League and the Champions League is still like very, very good. He's already got, I think he's got 5 goals in 4 games this season in the Champions League. And actually, I think Arsenal soon as well. So like, I think it's in Portugal. If Gyökeres could bag a couple of goals there, Like, I know the League of Portugal, Liga NOS, whatever you want to call it, like you said, that the league standard is nowhere near. And like Jacob said in the chat, Darwin Núñez come over, his numbers were good. But the fact that he has done it both in the Europa League and in the Champions League, and he already destroyed City this season, I just think he's apparently available for like £60 million as well. Newcastle have got every right to hold out for north of 100 mil as it stands right now. They've got to be looking at that. I think, well, hang on. If we can get...
What you described are cup competitions, Europa League by standard. I mean, the teams that are there, I mean, some of them won't make it in the top half of the Premier League. And you know, a lot of teams can beat Man City on a one-off game and stuff like that. And it's not to belittle or to make it smaller, but I think you need the larger. If you're comparing not just Isak and Gyökeres, but any player that's already playing in the league, Ollie Watkins compared to somebody else outside the league, and you're looking for a top striker, you're going to lean towards the one that's actually done it in the league and played day in, day out, played against your Brentfords, played against Fulham away and stuff like that. You don't know if Gyökeres can do that. There's a reason why Brighton didn't, who he was at earlier, didn't really push the button on him and keep him and sold him to the Portuguese in the league in the first place. Coventry didn't really keep him. They sold him on as well. It's not to say that he hasn't grown, he hasn't developed. And maybe he's found his league. Maybe Portugal is his style and it's his league. Like Enzo Fernandez, for instance.
Wait, but I think from like a business standpoint, it makes more sense to go get Gyökeres, who Henry said he does have he does have a release clause that's significantly lower than what you have to pay for Isak to get him from Newcastle. So now if you're Arsenal, you can go sign Gyökeres for maybe like 70 million, and then you could use maybe like another 30-40 million to go get another player versus having to use 130 million to go get Isak from a Newcastle who does have his injury problems, and maybe he can't play in a possession-based style of football in that U shape. He probably needs to be more in transition, etc. So I just think it makes sense.
Callum, can I ask you a question? As an Arsenal fan, of the two, they seem to be the two strikers you're linked to the most. Which of the two would you prefer and or think's more plausible of getting?
Do you know what? I think it's hard, and I think all of you make great points, and I think ultimately it's going to come down to where Arsenal are in January or in the summer. I think if we're in and around it by January, I do think we will try and get someone in, and I do think we will buy someone, and I think Gyökeres is probably the more likely one at that period of time because of the buyout clause, and I think it's more likely that he will come from Portugal to England and wanting to do that and wanting to come to the big boy league. I think Isak is unlikely in January because, as you just said, I think the money will be ridiculous. And again, I think that would knock Newcastle's aims and ambitions going forward because ultimately, they are a big club and they want to compete with the biggest clubs. And I think that would knock them and almost ruin their season depending on where they are as well. So I think, if we're in and around it in January, we'll go for we're poaching from Portugal, and like I say, if it goes down to the summer, it'll be Isak. That's what I personally think. I think it all depends on where we are in the race and Champions League to what we do, and if we'll hold out to the summer or not.
Also depends on Newcastle. If Newcastle get Europa League, or which I think they could because they've only got one game a week. That part, I don't think
we're taking your spot. We're going Champions League, mate.
I think it's more about Isak than it is either two. And I mean this in this regard. If Isak really wants Arsenal, I think we still live in an era where it happens, and that's because most clubs recognise you don't want to keep a player that doesn't want to be at your club. Even Pep and these guys, whether they've done it with Leroy Sané and others, when the player don't want to be there, they find an alternative. And I do mean this with all due respect to Newcastle. If they were going head to head along with, say, City and Arsenal for winning Premier League, etc., then I think Newcastle would find an alternative. But I still think with where you are, if Isak sits down with you all and says, "Look, guys, I really want to go," I think if the money's right, he may end up going in that regard. Newcastle won't want him to go, But if the player's forcing it and pushing it and asking, I think it could happen.
I don't think that he could say please though, Terry. I think he has to like force the move.
Yeah, but
For
maybe
Terry.
not force
Like,
it.
not
Maybe-
just, oh, like, you guys please tell me.
maybe. But typically speaking,
Like, he got to turn off his phone, not go to training.
no, maybe he has to do that. But I actually think most clubs again that are well run, and Newcastle are well run now. When a player behaves in the right way and asks to leave and explains why, as long as they get the right money, typically speaking, they're okay with doing it, because especially if you bring in 120 odd million pound, maybe Newcastle go and buy Victor Gyökeres as an example, and he comes in and does equally as well. Plus, they've made a profit, and I think Newcastle will already be planning, because most well-run clubs do. But what do we do if Isak leaves? Who's the alternative? They might look at it and say we love him, but actually we think that Gyökeres, or we think that Evan, I'm making it up now, but like an Evan Ferguson, we think an Evan Ferguson and spending the remaining 70 million pounds on a new creative midfield player, that elevates us to an even higher level. And I think that Newcastle will be planning for that eventuality.
But then what does that say about Newcastle? And I guess maybe Toon Tactics could answer, because when they got those owners, right?
Mhm.
Like because then if you sell him to a direct Premier League club that's competing for the league, I feel like that kind of sets like a bad precedent, because then it's like, all right, then what are the expectations for Newcastle then? Because when they got, is it the Saudis, the Qataris is one of them, right? Newcastle fans are talking about signing all the best players in the world and competing for the Premier League and competing in all these. So if you now sell Isak to Arsenal, I now feel like, well, now if you're Bruno Guimaraes, or if you're Sandro Tonali, or like Lewis Hall, whoever, you're sitting there like, well, they're clearly not serious about competing. So, like, why should I stay here? And the next thing you know, they might be looking to leave the club as well. And then now Newcastle just finds themselves in a predicament where they're just a rich Brighton, where it's like, okay, they'll just sell their best players and they'll just buy talent and then they'll sell them. So I feel like that's kind of a bad look optically for Newcastle to be selling their best players to direct Premier League clubs.
No, yeah, I think you make a good point. I think it matters how it happens. So if the scenario is Isak forces a move in January and we cave in, then it looks bad. But you have to also remember the reality of the situation is Gordon, who's got very similar to GA to Isak last year, just signed a new contract. Bruno Guimaraes, who's actually our top player, also signed a new contract. So there's a lot of blue chip players who are with us already staying, so they're already there, and so the owners are showing and directors are showing that there is a whole load of ambition there. So if Isak really, in terms of Isak, again, heavy bias, I do think he wants to stay, but should he want to leave and he get sold in the summer? In terms of look, I think what happens is then if you're a player, if you're Bruno, if you're other players and you're seeing Isak go, the next thing you're looking for is who do Newcastle bring in then? If Newcastle don't bring in anybody of note, for instance, and like what Terry was saying, if you bring in the Victor Gyökeres or somebody I personally wouldn't want Victor Gyökeres, but somebody of good standing, for instance, then it's, we'll keep it going. And in terms of Brighton, I wouldn't belittle Brighton. And we talked about structure. They've had their scouting, their recruitment, their directors, everything, managers ripped out of them consistently through the years. But they've maintained the structure and are competitive. And I think are only 3 points maybe behind Arsenal at the moment. So I think it shows as if there's more ways than one to kind of climb up the Premier League and win trophies nowadays. So I'm personally, as a fan, watching and kind of seeing the structure of my club and seeing the owners, seeing Paul Mitchell, who's very, very renowned of his track record in the recruitment. I'm not overly worried. Do I want Isak to stay? Obviously. But that's where the owners and the sporting director's job is, that if an Isak should leave, that they show the players real ambition and bring in the right level of talent into Newcastle.
I think
real quick, bro. Real quick. So I wasn't trying to disrespect Brighton when I brought up just being like a rich Brighton. I don't necessarily rate them.
You want bigging them up?
No. But the reason why I brought them up is because when you guys got taken over, the expectations were not to just be.
No, that was the expectation from the people looking in. If you read any of our journals or anything, articles, the owners are consistently telling people there's PSR, there's PSR, there's PSR. Yes, we are the richest owners. and we can buy most of your clubs 20 times over. However, we can't do that in the Premier League because of PSR, and that has always been the story.
So then why they? Okay, so then they just bought Newcastle to just have a team in the Prem. It's not to elevate them.
They said at the beginning, Will, that this was a kind of 10-year project because clubs can't do now what Chelsea were able to do when Roman came in for the first 10 years of his ownership, where you could spend unlimited. I think City had 3 to 4 seasons where they could spend an unlimited amount of money. Real Madrid, the club you picked to support, they went through before FFP existed. They would run up huge debts, and then the Spanish government would just pay this stuff off, right? So a lot of other clubs had an advantage that there weren't checks and balances in place. So I think it's how Newcastle do it. If they sell Isak to a Premier League rival for 120 million, and then they invest that money in 2 players that make them better as a club, I don't think Bruno Guimaraes and Tonali are going to say, well, fuck this, I'm leaving. If they take that money and then go and buy some 18-year-old wonder kid who's not proven, who ends up flopping, or they pocketed the money like some owners do, like the Glazers at my club, then I think those other players will go, bloody hell, where's the ambition? But I think there is an understanding that Newcastle were never going to be able to. Again, everybody started panicking when they took over. I remember sitting there watching, thinking, but the PSR and FFP dictate they can't spend whatever they want. And maybe they'll be able to increase the spending if the associated party transaction rules are slightly softened, and they'll be able to increase. But even then, they're not going to be able to sponsor their grass for £1 billion a season. Everyone thinks they're going to do something mad. You're probably talking about an extra 50 to £100 million a year income, which is significant, but it doesn't mean you can go out and sign 4 world-class players. On this conversation as well, though, it's been announced today that by the media that Manchester United will have what they call modest funds compared to previous managers for Ruben Amorim. Do you boys think United fans should be fearful of this news?
Not really. The narrative in the media is that Man United are always broke. They've never ever got any money. And then you go out and you do 150, 200 million pounds. Like the summer just gone in June and July, we were hearing Man United aren't prepared to go and spend huge amounts of money. And what didn't you do 170 million? Plus you got rid of 70 odd million of homegrown talent. And that's the thing that Man United have got, which have got over most of the Premier League teams, is their academy just churns talent out left, right, and centre. Like Romano announced earlier today that a 16-year-old who's very, very similar or similar to Kobe Mainoo has just come through. It wouldn't surprise me if he goes out on loan, gets put into the team, and then you've got another 60, 70 million pound asset. Like United will be absolutely fine. I think they're just playing down the media. They're going to let Ruben come in. He's got a relatively, other than a couple of games here or there, the first 10 games are a decent, set of games coming up, good fixtures. You'll go on a run. You'll get into January. You'll still probably go and sign a couple of players. And then it's all about the summer. But I just think they're just playing it down. They don't want a huge amount of pressure to come on Ruben. It actually seems like the first time where Man United are actually trying to get their act together. Like Ten Hag, kind of when he was coming in, he had a great record in Ajax. He beat Madrid at the Bernabeu. He had all these players, but the hierarchy wasn't like it is now. They've actually got some sort of structure, and I do think he will be a success in time. But I think they're just playing it down. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're 100% trying to take the pressure off the manager. If they say they haven't got this and haven't got that, then the gaffer, they're not competing at the top that they could do at the moment. So he's going to come in. There is going to be some improvement, and then it's going to be, look, he's been able to turn these players back into, like a Rashford, back into the player they was. And I think I do think it'll be positive, and then you'll see signings come in. I literally think it is just to take the pressure off the gaffer and give him a bit of time, and then they're back in probably more likely in the summer. That's what I personally think is going to happen.
My worry is that. Well, I say worry, but I think it just means that I think the owners and the directors have a vision for what they want Man United to do, and they've budgeted for that. And they know internally they're very confident about the players they're going to bring in. But they know that maybe externally the perception and people might think, well, they're not spending as they used to. They're not big old Man United. The problem is they might be wise Man United now in terms of the players that they're getting in. And I think they're just preparing people for that we've got our targets. They're not going to be as, naming lights type of your Falcao's, your Zlatan Ibrahimovic's type of thing. They're going to be names that you might necessarily have heard of, but they are going to make this team better. And so that's my kind of take on it. I think it's PR, but it's positive PR in terms of what they're planning to do and the players they're planning to recruit. It's going to be still Man United.
It's the Man United I grew up with. And yes, we bought big players. We bought Andy Cole from Newcastle as an example. But that was few and far between. We got Van Persie in the latter stages of Sir Alex Ferguson as an example. But you actually go through what Man United used to do, and this was ever before Fergie was at the club. This goes right back to the 50s. This goes right back to that period. We built the Busby Babes in the same way. They weren't all, a lot of people think they were, but Sir Bobby Charlton was from sort of the Newcastle area of the country. The late, great Duncan Edwards was from the Birmingham area. Man United have recruited. International recruitment wasn't happening in that era of football, but we would scour the country looking for the best young talents and look to bring them in. And we will buy some stars, there's no doubt. But what Man United have historically, and this is why I get confused about certain United fans in terms of, I get the kids that have only been supporting us 10 years or whatever, but the people that are sort of my similar age, we're acting broke. But we were never the team that went out. You actually go back through Premier League history. When Fergie retired, I think we were only the fourth highest spenders in the league. And like Spurs had only spent £30 million less in that time than Fergie did. So we were big spenders, but it wasn't like we were stripping everybody and leaving everybody behind. But it's about going out and finding the Ruud van Nistelrooy before he's Ruud van Nistelrooy. Jaap Stam before he's Jaap Stam. Man United have always done that, and that is what we are looking to get back to. Equally, it says we're going to have modest budgets. Well, we have over fucking spent, and everybody's told us that for 10 years. We have overpaid and undersold for 11 years. So I am so glad that we now have owners that are not saying what Woodward and co were. We can do things in the transfer market and nobody else can dream of. Well, now everyone's going to whack their prices up, you moron. And so for me, I think we can still buy, because I actually think we bought a lot of quality in the last 11 years. It just came into a horrible scenario and situation. We didn't buy consistently some bad signings, of course, but there's a lot of quality there. We will still do that, but we will do it at a cheaper price and they'll come in with a little bit less hype. Because if Pogba came to Man United for £50 million, there wouldn't have been the hype as an example. You look at Anthony, that should have been a £25 million signing, where even if he flopped, you just go, it's 25 million. It hasn't worked, but worth the gamble as an example. We could buy it. I reckon with good people running our club, we could do the last 11 years again, buy all the same players, but spend 400 to 500 million pound in sales. So I think Man United fans have got to get off of this weird notion that we've got broke billionaires. They're the second richest owners in the league, only behind Newcastle's. They will invest money. In fact, they've put over £200 million of their own cash in already. We're going to get a new stadium that's going to be the biggest in the country. They're investing billions into that. At the same time, that we're still going to have one of the highest wage bills in the country and in Europe. And we will still probably on average spend 150 to 200 million pound a year, but we will raise more through sales, which we've been awful at. You actually go back and look at the amount of players we've sold. I think we sold someone this summer. Scott McTominay was something like one of us, barring since it's post Fergie era, was maybe a higher sell outside of Angel Di Maria.
30 mil?
At 30 odd mil. And I think Di Maria and Lukaku were higher. Everybody else we sold for less than McTominay. And the amount of players we've sold that are better than McTominay in that time is ridiculous. So yeah, I'm not worried about it. And we'll get comments like this saying copium. No, not at all. It's the opposite to copium. Finally, I feel relaxed about my owners. I want to hear this. I think we're playing a bit of Billy bullshit, playing it down, but I want us to act broke. I want us to pretend that we ain't got any money. The best business people in the world typically act like they're running out of cash now. Loads. You ever sell your house to an experienced house buyer last minute? Sorry, I can't raise the mortgage. We're gonna have to pull out. They try and get an extra 20, 30,000 off the price of your house. You deal with experienced people. They do this. I want us to act like this. I want us to be thrifty. I want us to save money because I've always hated this notion from fans. I'll just spend whatever it costs. It ain't my money. It's the dumbest logic in history because there's the limit to what everybody can spend. And if you burn the candle at both ends, guess what? The wick runs out a lot quicker than you want it to. And Man United have been in that scenario under Ollie, especially, where we had a pretty good team. You know, if we could go out in January and buy a better striker or buy a better midfielder, but there was no money left because we kept on burning it. So, yeah, I love what they're saying right now. For me, I think it's great. I like the direction that we're going in. You know, it's going to be a long, hard journey to try and get back to the top. But I'm growing ever more confident that we will get there in the coming 2 or 3 seasons with the structure, who's running the club, the new head coach, and just what they're saying and doing. It's the doing for me. And they're not reinventing the wheel. They're not discovering fire. They're just operating like all the other successful giant clubs do around Europe. And I think for me, that's the most important bit. So yeah, I'm very, very happy. I'm not worried about the news. It is what it is. A comment here from PD, who says the Real Madrid fan waffling about Emery finished 5th his first season when he couldn't buy a win in the last 8 games in the league and got trashed in the Europa League final. Also got sacked after having Arsenal in 11th.
If Unai Emery spent as much money and had as much time as Arteta has, you guys would be in a lot better situation right now. Unai Emery's a better manager. And wait, how long did it take Arteta to finish higher than Unai Emery? What, like two
seasons?
Yeah, 2 seasons after, right? Because, yeah, Emery got 5th. And then, yeah, he got sacked the following season. And that's just because he came in after Wenger. He was never going to get enough time. Like, when you replace a legend, your leash is always short. So the bar has dropped in terms of standards at Arsenal. So here's what it is.
Tell my mate, could you be a bro by making a compilation of all the PGMOL answers starting from last? Bruv, do you know how long that would take me? You mean all of the things that Howard Webber said? Maybe I will try my best to put some of those together, but I wish I had like cataloged them now though, so they're just quicker and easier to find and go to, because some you remember and they seem to get buried on social. Like trying to find some of them is mad.
But for objectivity, you'd also have to catalog all the right decisions at the same time as well, wouldn't you?
So for me, do you know what? For me, it's not even about right or wrong decisions anymore when it comes to the PGMOL. It's more about, one week they'll say this is the correct decision, and I go, I agree with it, and I listen to the explanation. I go, that makes sense. The following week, a decision is 90% the same, as in the incident's 95% the same. They give an opposite decision, and then they sit there and justify it, but the justifications for that contradict what they said the previous week, and I sit there and think, what the fuck's going on here? It's very weird. It's very, very weird. Henry, if Jake Paul offered $1 million, would you fight him?
100%. Without a shadow of a doubt. I'll get my ass. Well, he's probably about 60 pounds heavier than me, so I probably would get my ass kicked.
Yeah, but if you also spent 3 or 4 years roiding like him, you'd also be that big.
Yeah.
He definitely roids. He definitely roids.
Yeah, it's some sort of Dianab or performance enhanced drug that he's on, where he's just overnight like 2 foot wider.
So you don't think that you have a chance, Henry?
Sorry?
I said, you don't think that you have a chance?
Well, I used to box for like 8 years. Like, it's muscle memory. The problem is he's 6'2". I'm 5'11".
8. 5'8".
Well, I'm 5'11" in the right shoes, but 5'10". But yeah, so he's now got unlimited budget from companies that he's invested in, where he can hire Mayweather's coaches and just get trained. But he's fighting, like, let's be real. If Mike Tyson wanted to, he would have killed him that night.
No, he wouldn't.
Mike Tyson's legs are gone.
Mike Tyson's legs are gone. But hang on. Just forget that. This is why, listen, I've got respect for anyone who gets in the ring and takes punches, and Jake Paul has done that with some people that can throw punches, you know, some ex-MMA guys, etc. But the current, he says that what he annoys me with is he says things like, I'm the face of boxing, I run boxing. The current undisputed light heavyweight champion has called him out and said, well, let's get a fight on. He's responded by saying, I told you I run boxing, but hasn't said yes or no. And this is my problem. He won't fight anyone similar size, age, and weight because he'd be out of that ring in less than a round. And that's the problem with it. I'm all for the WWE kind of entertainment element. It's fine. But it's when people, and even Jake Paul saying it's when Jake Paul's fans say he's a proper boxer. He's fought one proper boxer in Fury who is bang average, and he lost. So yeah, it's just do it for fun. White collar boxing has a place in this world. It's always existed. There's no issues with it. But please stop calling yourself real fighters, because
He
real
wants to
fighters.
get in an octagon with McGregor. Like, I reckon McGregor with one arm.
McGregor again. I mean this generally. Any top level UFC fighter, even against the best boxers in the world in a cage, beat them inside a minute. They take him down. And then McGregor is not even renowned for his groundwork, but he would get hold of Jake Paul, he'd get him on the floor, and he'd choke him unconscious in a minute.
Yeah.
Be done. Be finished.
Yeah.
Be finished. Look, I want to say, Cole Froch has come out and called him out. Cole Froch has been retired 11 years. Cole Froch absolutely puts him in the ground. He just does, knocks him out. Look, I want to thank everyone who's tuned in. Please make sure you hit the like button before you leave. Make sure you subscribe. Thank you to my guests, Toon Tactics. We've had Will, Henry. We had Callum on earlier, plus Ram. And Harry was also on the show. So thank you to them. Thank you to all my super chatters. We're back tomorrow with more content, including Straight Facts with Dan Potts is his name. Dan Potts and LB are on with me tomorrow. Take care. Goodbye. God bless. And we'll see you all again soon. Thank you.